Motivators, on the other hand, is not about the how or the what. Motivators gets to the core of our own personal why. It's where we find value, joy, and meaning in the world. They're the keys to fulfillment in the workplace. Chances are, if you love what you do, and if you find your work to be fulfilling, then chances are at least one, if not both, of your top two motivators are being fulfilled in your work. That's kind of the ideal scenario. So as we are working with students and trying to help them determine, what they may want to do after school, as we're working with those who are transitioning between careers or who are transitioning out of maybe the armed forces and military into civilian life, as we are working with those who are at the end of their educational experience are now transitioning into the workforce. This is the place to start to look at that fit for the job, the role, and the company, and will this really be a great fit for each individual? I'm going to say about 5 to 7 years ago, there was a survey done in the United States of the workforce, and it was really asking questions about fulfillment and happiness. And at the time, about 30% of the workforce said that they found their jobs fulfilling, that it brought them joy and happiness, or that they felt like it was really serving a greater purpose, or again, was just sort of that personal fulfillment and happiness. Only 30%. Like, that's a pretty sad statistic that only 30% of people who are working like their jobs. Our goal is, and one of the things that motivators can help us better understand, is how we can actually align what's important and valuable to us with finding a job where we may actually find some personal fulfillment and happiness. If you've ever, is this the slide I have next? No. If you have ever seen the TED Talk from Simon Sinek on the golden circle, it's also leads to this idea of understanding our own personal why, and I'll make sure to reference that in my follow-up email. It's one of the most popular TED Talks. It's from quite a few years ago, but it's 17 minutes that would not be a waste of your time if you're interested in hearing this talked about from a different point of view. But when we look at our motivators, in the bottom left-hand corner of your summary page, you have a graph that looks something like this. We all have the same 6 motivators, but they're ordered on your page in the order to which you said these were important to you, and these are mine. So how do we read this graph? Again, they're ordered in the importance that we've stated in the survey. When you look at this graph, the graph goes from 0 to 10, and this blue bar in the center is the intensity to which we said each of these was important to us. And you can see that value off to the left-hand side. To the right-hand side. Under this bar, there's a number. This is the average. It's the average at the time that you took the survey, because about every 6 months, these are being re-normed. And so the average will shift some over time. Also, for those of you in Vietnam, if you or for anyone who English is not your native language, if you changed the language selector when you took the survey and you took a survey in a language other than English, your average is going to be based on everyone who took the survey in that language. So your average may potentially be based on a different region of the world than the United States. So if the number under here is the average, this red bar represents the statistical norm. This is where This is one standard deviation above and below the mean. This is where most people, or 68% of those surveyed, their intensity falls within this range of red. So most people will have most, maybe all, of their scores that fall within those ranges of the norms. You'll see on my report, I have 3 of my intensities that fall within these ranges of red. Regardless of how intense your scores are, your top 2 really are the 2 that are most important to you. But if your number 1 or 2 happen to look anything like mine, and that blue bar comes out over the range of red, then this may not just be important to you. This is potentially a passion. This is vital for you. This is like the keys to your fulfillment are even more so important around this specific motivator. And you may also find that you engage in these types of activities both in work and out of work. While the top 2 are important for engagement and happiness, it's also important to know your number 6. And this is not where you find joy or happiness or fulfillment. And it doesn't mean that you can't be successful in whatever this happens to be. It just means that this will never be your why. Here's a quick example without getting too deep into the definitions. So the high social motivator is about wanting to be of service, wanting to help others, having a cause that's really important to you, right? My number 6, the utilitarian, is about seeking financial rewards for what you do. So for instance, if one of our partners wanted me to do something, or even a friend of mine, right? Anyone in the world, any situation. If someone wanted me to do something for them that I wasn't really all that excited about doing. So we're in the middle of winter here in Washington State, and the snow we're expecting a lot of snow in the next couple days. So if someone wanted me to shovel their driveway, I don't like shoveling. I don't like being out in the snow. Even though I live in the snow, I stay inside when it's cold. If someone wanted me to shovel their driveway and they offered to pay me to do that, that is really not going to motivate me to want to do something I don't want to do. You can see that that payment motivator for me is number 6. However, if I had a sweet elderly neighbor who needed help and needed the support of someone else to shovel her driveway because she couldn't do it on her own, and I'm concerned that she's going to fall and hurt herself, that falls more under my social motivator about wanting to be helpful and help someone out, and I may be more inclined to go ahead and help shovel her driveway. So this can potentially help us, again, understand also where maybe some conversations even around our work, the work we're doing, or like larger goals, why we're more invested in some of those ideas, some of those teams, some of those projects, and why we feel less drawn to some of the other projects. Again, this alignment around your top and bottom motivators can start to explain that a little bit. So when we think about motivators, there's really 2 main types of motivation. We have our intrinsic and our extrinsic motivators. Intrinsic motivators are those that more naturally come from within us. They are at our core what's important to us. And those extrinsic motivators are those external forces or like external opinions that others may impress upon us. So when you think about those distinctions, where do you see intrinsic and extrinsic motivators in this picture?
Hi.
Hi, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think the bear is extrinsic.
The bear is an extrinsic motivator
Yeah,
on the cyclist,
yes.
right? Because he's like, hey, you see that bear, you're on a bike, that motivates you to want to pedal faster, right? You don't want to be lunch for the bear. Fantastic. What other intrinsic or extrinsic motivators might you see? Or maybe what can you make up about this picture?
I don't know if survival will is kind of intrinsic motivator here.
It is, right? That will to survive. Like I can't tell. There's snow on the ground, so it's either the beginning of winter, or maybe it is the end of winter and starting into spring. But either way, I think that bear might be hungry. And so this bear might be intrinsically motivated to get the last or the first meal for survival. Maybe this bear has cubs somewhere that we can't see in the picture and is trying to also provide for their family. Sure, I can make that up. What about this cyclist? When I look at this cyclist, I see someone who has all the gear and the outfit to be a cyclist. So something tells me they like cycling. There must be some intrinsic motivation for them to want to be cycling, to have all the clothes, but also to be in shorts and a t-shirt and there's snow on the ground. This person must really enjoy and find happiness and fulfillment around cycling to have the whole outfit, be in shorts in the cold. They have to love this at some core level. At the end of the day, we can make up a whole lot of stories about who has what motivator. And motivators can be easy to misunderstand, right? Many times we want to make the bear the villain in this picture. And we want to say the bear is bad because, I don't know, maybe the bear is wanting to eat the cyclist and this is just horrible. But again, we may not consider that the bear is just trying to survive and may have a family to feed. The same is true in our own motivators and in the motivators of people around us. Sometimes really understanding their core reasoning why behind what is important to them or why they do what they do is many times much less obvious than, say, their behavior or their DISC scores. So I'm going to show you a quick video that describes each of the motivators.
Birds and trees, like my favorite thing is like sit when we go on like the retreat, to sit at night and just listen. Music is a big thing, like that brings me a lot of joy, just to like listen to music, make music, just like being able to connect with lyrics and stuff like that. That's kind of like my big thing that kind of brings me happiness.
Okay, who has aesthetic in their top two? Hands in the screens, emojis up, yes in the chat. High aesthetics generally have some form of creative self-expression, whether this is art, music, or writing, or some form of art, music, and writing. Sometimes there is a connection and appreciation to nature, whether that is wanting to be out in nature, or even just the difference between natural light and overhead light, that it potentially has an impact on you. Your surroundings have an impact. So maybe the way you decorate or design your workspace or your home is a reflection of your creativity. Also, some high aesthetics really want to create a sense of balance and harmony, both in their own life, but also potentially in the lives of others. And so we can see some people who go into mental health professions, or even some of those who practice meditation and other mindfulness activities can also come at this from a high aesthetic motivator. When I speak to really high aesthetics, those that it's their number 1 or 2, and that blue line comes out over the range of red, many of them have told me that when they walk in a room, the room has a feeling, and that feeling has an impact on them. If this is true for you or anyone that you're working with, it's really important for those folks particularly to make sure that they are putting their feet on the ground and doing an in-person interview before they would choose to take a job at any location, because the environment and the surroundings will matter. If you work in an industry where you are helping young people select a college or a university, again, it's going to be really important that they go visit, that they actually spend time there before they say yes. This can also be true about things like buying a car or renting an apartment. Before a passionate aesthetic says yes, they should make sure they experience the space first. Okay, next.
I knew that like money was important, and that like that's how I base my decisions, because I find joy in that. I like that's cool to me when you do something and then you get compensated for it.
Okay, who has utilitarian as their 1 or 2? If it's your number 1, chances are it is about the financial reward. It is about being financially compensated for the work that you do. And you will be incentivized or motivated to want to do more when you can then make more based on that performance, or that return is based on your work that you're putting in. Sometimes if it's your number 2, it's less about money, and it's more about being really practical and efficient. You see your time as really valuable, and you don't like to waste your time. You're someone who likes to be really efficient so that you're not wasting your time and are really going after things in the most time-saving, efficient, practical way of doing things. So it could be about money. It could be about being practical and efficient and valuing your time. Yeah, this is often. Yeah, so this is all of the motivators in the end do have an impact on our career choices, in a sense of, if you choose a career that is aligned with your top motivators, chances are you will find that career more fulfilling. If you end up in a job where none of your top motivators are being fulfilled, that job may still provide for your basic necessities, but it may not actually bring you joy or fulfillment. So we can all do any job out there, right? We are capable of adapting. You can do most any job, work for most any company that you may want to. But the question in making these choices from a place of self-awareness is, will this actually be a good fit for me? Would I actually enjoy working for this company? Would I actually enjoy my role? Will I find fulfillment there? And that's really the key to taking your understanding of motivators and applying them to career choices, both for yourself and for those that you might be working with. If you are in a school setting, motivators are also a great piece of alignment for clubs and organizations within your school. If you want students to become more engaged in your school place, chances are getting them aligned with a club, an organization, or a group that fulfills their top motivators will help those things happen. So the change in motivators over time is a really great question. Let me actually talk about all of the motivators, and then I'll come back to if they change over time.
I really just like to learn. Like, there is really no topic that doesn't interest me. I love to just do Google searches. I love to read a variety of different books. Like, I don't have a favorite author. I don't have a favorite type of music that I listen to. I just love to learn everything there is to learn. So if you will teach me it, I will learn it, and I will teach it to someone else.
Okay, who has theoretical in their top 2? Yeah, lots coming in. Okay, so theoretical is, as it sounds, theoretical is about loving learning. And it is finding joy and happiness in just learning for the sake of learning. Depending on if this is your number 1 or your number 2 and how intense it is, you could be a person who may love learning a little bit of everything about a little bit of everything. Right? You're the person everyone wants on their trivia team because you know all kinds of stuff about all kinds of stuff. Or it could just be specific topics that are the most interesting to you, and you want to be able to dive deeply into those subjects and really learn all there is to know about them, to be very knowledgeable in whatever those topics and subjects are. For high theoreticals, when we think about work, this is a place where it's really important that either A, you get to apply the things that you love learning about, and that gets to be part of your job, or that the job itself still requires continual learning and application of that new knowledge. Even if it's not your favorite subject, if you are still being challenged intellectually to continue to learn more and to apply that knowledge, then this motivator is potentially being fulfilled in your work. As I said earlier, in an ideal world, we can get both of our top 2 motivators fulfilled at work. In a good but not perfect world, maybe only one of those is being fulfilled at work, and the other one you're fulfilling outside of work. You're still finding fulfillment and joy in your life, just not necessarily only through your job. And in a less than ideal situation where you probably don't like your job very much, neither of your top 2 motivators are being fulfilled in your work. So you will not find the work that you're doing truly fulfilling. So hopefully you're finding that fulfillment outside of work. Theoretical is another one that, especially around education spaces, those that choose jobs that value learning, that put you in a space where learning is happening, or even in roles that value you to continue your learning, we can be very biased against those that do not value learning. So just as, utilitarian was my number 6, there are people where theoretical is their number 6, and trying to convince them that loving learning for the sake of learning, like, you're never going to convince a number 6 theoretical that this is true, because it will not be true for them. This is not where they find joy and fulfillment. But they can learn and be successful in learning around anything necessary to achieve their top 2 motivators, or to achieve the current next step in what they're trying to do. They will learn what is necessary to do that, but they don't find joy and happiness just in learning something new. And this is true of all of the motivators, but I think sometimes the theoretical is easier for a lot of us to understand because either we are or we aren't theoretical, and these concepts make sense to most of us.
Whether it's a little project that's going to be for a couple of days in school or a whole semester thing, class president or something like that, I'll always try to step up to that and see if it's something that myself and other people would be interested in me doing. I enjoy being in the spotlight and stuff like that.
Who has individualistic in their top two? Find my hands up. Where is my guy? I'm not able to put out, here's my hand in the screen. Yeah, absolutely. So high individualistics, we are the humans who from the time we're born are saying, you're not the boss of me, I'm the boss of me. High individualistics want to be in charge of themselves, and they're often just fine being in charge of other people as well, because they want to be in control of their own choices. They want to potentially be their own boss, or at least have a lot of independence and autonomy in the work they do. High individualistics do not like being told what to do. Many high individualistics like being recognized for their accomplishments. So whether that is a public recognition, whether it's, you know, a private congratulations, whether it is an award or an achievement, most individualistics like being recognized for their leadership roles potentially, or the choices that they're making. And there is something about high individualistics that can also be pretty driven and ambitious. Sometimes this gets a bad rap. I know on our reports, this is often also referred to as the political motivator, and we can have our own opinions about politics and people that go into politics. But at the end of the day, if you think about what is the role of people in politics, is they are our local, state, or national leaders. They've often been elected into those roles, so they got to win the debate and be recognized as sort of the winner or the leader that was chosen. They're often the ones who are making new laws, new regulations, new rules for the rest of us. And they will be recognized for those accomplishments and potentially have a legacy that they may leave based on what they have designed. This is another one. If you are in an education space, especially around younger students, so those that are still in, say, high school or secondary school, this individualistic motivator can sometimes get some kiddos into trouble because they want to be recognized, they want to stand out as a leader, and if we aren't giving them constructive roles or helping them channel that desire to be a leader in a positive direction, these are those that turn into the class clown, or those that can really distract from a classroom, because any attention is better than no attention, even if that attention is negative. And so if you're seeing this, you may even see this in some of your coworkers, that person that's always trying to get attention, but they're not really doing it in a positive way. If there is a task, a role, a leadership position that you can give someone where they could be recognized for doing something that is more helpful to the team, for doing something that is more constructive in a classroom, you may be able to shift that energy away from them being destructive to actually have them be more of a contributing factor in a group.
Because I do really like to give back. Like, I enjoy doing anything, whether it's like feeding homeless people or, you know, like giving people money if they need it, like whatever it is. I really like that, warms my heart to like give back to people. So if I could do that on a bigger scale.
Who has social in their top two? This social motivator is not about wanting to talk or socialize. That is the I bar in the disc graph, right? How talkative or how friendly and outgoing. This social motivator is about wanting to be of service. It is about wanting to help others or help a cause that's really important to you. It is potentially about wanting to serve something greater than yourself or solve a problem in the world that's really important to you. And really high aesthetics, especially those that their blue line is over that range of red, tend to have a more altruistic point of view, that optimistic, like always looking on the bright side point of view. So what's really important for the high socials to figure out is, what's your cause? What's the problem you want to help solve? Who do you want to help? Like, where do you want to invest your time that feels most rewarding to you? And can you find a job that allows you to do that? At least part of the time, if not all the time. It's important for high socials not only to help in general, but to be able to dig deeper and figure out what is that true, what is your personal cause. Because even though helping in general, there will be some fulfillment for that for high socials, where you find the most fulfillment and where you actually like feel fed in return is when you find that cause that really is the one that's most important to you, and to be able to give your time and talents and energy to that.
Very family oriented. I don't like to do crazy wild things, and like if I do, it's around family, so it's all my priorities are always family oriented.
Okay, who has traditional in their top two? High traditionals typically are very principled people. They have some set of rules or beliefs in their life that they choose to live by. And it's not just that they have these rules, but they actually make decisions for themselves based on alignment to their personal value system. Many high traditionals, again, have this. I often ask high traditionals, like, what does it mean to you to be a good person in this world? And most high traditionals have a list. And each high traditional has a different list. So it's important for them to know what it means to them to be a good person. Those are their sort of rules of right living. And they are going to make choices for themselves that are in alignment with those. And it's really important that they not choose career pathways and organizations to work for, that those jobs would violate their values. Now, for those of you that might be like me, that traditional is at the bottom of your list, it doesn't mean you don't have any values or you lack a moral compass. It just means that this idea of principles and traditions is not the lens through which you are making decisions in your life, and it's not the core source of your fulfillment and joy. Okay, so that is essentially the top 6 motivators. You all have your own top 2. Let me open it up really quick to any questions that you may have, or any comments or thoughts having gone through this basic understanding of the 6 motivators. As we think about how these apply when we start considering the workforce, the truth is you could find most any career field could be fulfilling to most any motivator, It all comes down to the nuance of where you do that work and what your focus is. So for instance, if we were to think for a moment about the healthcare industry, those in the medical field, you can find a job, multiple jobs for any motivator within the medical field. Let me do a quick around the board. I'm going to start with social and go around. So high social jobs in the medical field are going to be things like being a nurse, maybe being a specialized nurse, or even those doctors and nurses who spend their time volunteering their time through organizations like Doctors Without Borders, or those who specifically volunteer portions of their time to helping those that are less fortunate, or who don't have the medical care that they can provide. When we think about theoretical in the medical field, people that go into research are often very high theoretical, and also the more specialized your medical degree often requires a degree of high theoretical. So for instance, some of your surgeons and neurosurgeons, maybe even some cancer treatment specialists, again, they have to be very detail oriented and know all kinds of information and continue to learn about advancements within their field of medicine. For the high aesthetics in the medical field, this could be things like therapists and counselors, even those that are doing things like art and music therapy, or maybe even those that specifically work with children. The high aesthetic too is looking for, I would also say those that go into plastic surgery and they're looking to create or change someone's external aesthetics. Aesthetic could be very high for them as well. Utilitarian, who in the medical field makes all kinds of money? It's those surgeons, and really specialized surgeons, and those that potentially get known for their specialty can often get paid more for what they do. Also, those that may want to own their own practice and maybe even have other doctors and nurses and physicians work for them. So they're not only making money off their work, but they're potentially also making money off work that others are bringing into their practice. High traditional. So these would be things like your family doctors, many times your pediatricians, right? They love the family nature of the work that they do. Also those that may work for large hospital organizations, even more on a regulations and rules sense to make sure that everyone is abiding by the policies, could also be a high traditional. And individualistics in the medical field, again, these are going to be maybe those that seek supervisor or management positions within the work that they're doing, or those, again, that they may want to start their own practice, or they may want to, again, develop their skills in a way that they become known or famous or called upon, become an expert in certain areas of medicine that others may call on them, or that they may be asked to speak based on their expertise. There really is no industry that I can think of where you can't find either an organization or a role within an organization that may fit most motivators. And as we said, so the top two are the most important. This is a great question about the third. If you're number 3, let me go back to my graph. If you're number 3 motivator, if the blue line is at or above the average, chances are this is also important to you. Mine is not there. Mine is just under the average. And this is really only situationally like important or motivating to me, but really not at all. It really is the top two that are most important. Sometimes the third, again, if your intensity of the third is at or above the average. Someone also asked about, do these stay the same over time? So if you have, similar to DISC, if you have characteristics within these motivators that are more intense. So for instance, when you look at my graph, I can tell you my number one motivator has always been true for me. It's been true since the day I was born and was figuring myself out. I've always wanted to be of service and help other people. And it's taken me some time to figure out where I find the most value, what my own cause is. But I've always wanted to be of service and always have had that altruistic outlook on life. And for me, I've never made decisions based on money or based on being able to get paid for them. This is my highest and my lowest. They're pretty extreme, and I can tell you and tradition doesn't come into my decision making, and is really not something that is very important to me. These things have always been true for me. I think if you have someone, or if you yourself potentially have all 6 of your motivators that are all in that range of red, so they all seem about equally important, this could potentially shift a bit more for you. Funny story about a group of students. We work with a group of engineering students at a university in Arizona. And when they take this assessment as freshmen at the university, they're typically like number 5 or number 6 utilitarian. That's not really most of their motivators. But when we assess them again in their last semester of their last year of school, suddenly they're all high utilitarians. Why? Because they're thinking about the practical nature of what's waiting for them next. They need to get a job so they can pay off their student loans and not have to move back into their mother's basement. Right? And so they're thinking about money is their primary thought process, but it's not because it necessarily is where they find happiness long term. It's just their current necessity. It's a current need. So if we were to assess them again about 5 years later, chances are this utilitarian motivator is going to settle back down to where it was for them when they started school. So you can see some shifts based on really primary needs, or sometimes you'll see motivators that show up based on upbringing and exposure, or which of these motivators is valued within a person's upbringing. And so even as you're talking through these motivators, it's important to continue to ask, like, what in this is important to you? Is this really important to you? Or is this potentially something you've been told should be important to you? And once a person really understands what the 6 are, they could potentially reorder them even for themselves in their own mind around what is really most important to them. So great question about the correlation between DISC and motivators. The DISC and the motivator questionnaire are 2 totally separate questionnaires, and the way that you respond to one does not influence the responses in the other. There is some correlation we see sometimes between patterns in DISC and patterns in motivators. But at the end of the day, you can have any motivator score and any DISC score. If they feel true for you, then that is what's true for you. Sometimes, though, these do influence each other. So for instance, my individualistic is my number 2. And part of how this shows up for me in combination with my high social is like, I want to be seen as a leader in advancing my cause. I want to be seen as a leader or as someone who people come to when they are trying to help those students or to really advance this idea of self-awareness around career choices. Like that's really my cause, and that's where I want to be seen as a leader, and also in like equipping other people to do this work so that we can all have a larger impact. It's really not about me, it's about the cause. And I think part of that is because individualistic is my number 2, not my number 1. And I think part of that is because my D score in my DISC is very low, that I don't always want to be as outspoken or there is less of a directness. I like to do it in a more nuanced way versus a in your face and very direct kind of a way. But I can see how someone who might have their motivators in a different order or might have a different DISC score, it would show up and you would experience those differently than you may experience those from me based on my combinations. I don't know that it necessarily creates conflict when you have certain DISC and motivator combinations, but I do think it creates nuance. It creates an opportunity for us to continue to become more aware and really just asking ourselves the questions like, what do you think that means? How does that show up for you? Because just because the high C is about the details, and yes, the traditional is sort of about rules, they don't have to conflict. But I will say I noticed that people who have a high C in their DISC score and have traditional in their top 2, these two do what do I want to say? They play together in a very different way than when you have the high C and a low traditional motivator. So for instance, high C DISC with a high traditional motivator, they often tend to be much more detail oriented and precise and specific around their personal rules of living. Whereas high C in the DISC score, who has the low traditional, many of your details and your like the way you go about your own things that you like to be precise about are less about values and traditions and personal rules. And maybe it's just about that other motivator for you.